welcome back to Cinematic Sarcastic, the podcast that talks all things movies and television. I'm Natalie, and I'm your host. On today's episode, we are going to talk about Hold Your Breath. This is a new thriller that is out starring Sarah Paulson. I know that the new Joker film is out. I never saw the first one. I might do a review on that. I might watch the first one and do a review on that. You guys can let me know in the comments if you would like to hear that or not. But after everyone has been talking about how terrible the second movie is, I just did not want to subject myself to that. And I figured I would watch something that might have been a little bit more interesting. So Hold Your Breath was the direction we were going to go. So for anyone who is not familiar with this film, this is set in the 1930s in Oklahoma. So this would be the Dust Bowl, Great Depression era. And we have Sarah Paulson and her two daughters who are living basically on what would have been a farm, which obviously during the Dust Bowl is now nothing but dirt. And there is this sort of entity that they become frightened of called the Gray Man, who they sort of think in this backdrop can get into them through like the dust and the air and make them do terrible things. So after watching this film, the only thing I could think was that whoever had wrote this, and I'm not sure if it is based on a book, if it's just written by someone in the movie industry, if it was like a screenplay or a script, whoever it was that wrote this movie basically had just seen the movie The Others and went, that, but less interesting and more dirt. Like that's exactly what it reminds me of. The similarities between The Others and Hold Your Breath are just, it's like uncanny at a certain point. So we do have, the single mother and her two children. In this case, it's two daughters, whereas in The Others, it was a boy and a girl. And the husband in The Others has gone away to war, whereas in Hold Your Breath, the husband has gone for work-related purposes, but he is not in the film. I think there's only like one scene that you actually see her husband, and it's a very quick, maybe 2-minute portion of the film. You never see him beyond that point. And a lot of this is more so like psychological. The difference, I would say, between why The Others worked and why Hold Your Breath doesn't quite is, at least in The Others, you had that really cool sort of premise behind the psychic coming in and sort of all of these interesting what's really going on, this like unreliable narrator sort of situation, which you get a little bit in Hold Your Breath. We are following mostly Sarah Paulson's character. You don't see a ton from other point of views until later in the film. So you don't quite know through most of Hold Your Breath that she is an unreliable narrator. It's dropped. There are a couple of hints every now and then, but for the most part, we are relying on her to be sort of the truth teller of this story. And so as she starts to kind of unravel, you attribute it more, I think, to the situation and the surroundings. And because that time was such just a horrific moment in history of people that were out in this location literally starving to death. A lot of them were getting sick. A lot of them were just at extreme rates of poverty. And you can imagine trying to single-handedly raise children when you have difficulties getting enough food, when you can't go outside for the most part. Like this movie does a really excellent job of demonstrating what 1930s Oklahoma would have been like with some of those dust storms that were happening, and the loss of life during those is demonstrated really well in this film. It's kind of just the sort of thriller aspect of it that I feel like falls a little bit short. I think that there is so much time that sort of passes where there isn't too much happening. Like the climax or the culmination of everything happens really very close to the very, very end of the film. And it's not the most exciting in terms of what's going on. Like a lot of it is just psychological stuff. This really gradual unraveling of Sarah Paulson's character in the wake of what is happening, but you don't get a picture of that. And this sort of gray man entity, it's not utilized in the best way. And the children aren't necessarily very helpful. So like in the others, the children kind of knew what was going on. And so they were also telling the story. Whereas in this one, only like one of the girls is older, one of the girls is younger. But the younger of the two siblings is deaf, I believe. And so she's not communicating really other than in very brief moments of sign language. She's not communicating things, but you can tell in the story she doesn't really know what's happening anyway. She would have probably been quite young when this other sort of event had happened that makes the older daughter so concerned. And you never see that first event. So it's like you're going off of not having the knowledge, but you're expected to still be sort of afraid of this thing happening, and it just doesn't quite come together in the best way. I do think it is moderately okay. I would give it maybe a 3 out of 5 stars. It certainly is not a terrible movie. I think the acting in it is quite well done. I think, Sarah Paulson's character obviously is extraordinary in this. I think just the story itself was a little bit lackluster and could have used a little bit of a boost, especially considering there isn't much as far as like, there's not very many characters. There's not a lot of sets happening. We are segregated mostly to a singular home and a lot of dirt. So you need sort of a really hefty story to keep something like that going. And this one just didn't quite make it there. So while I do believe this one could have been much better, unfortunately, it wasn't really all that great. If you are looking for something that's a little bit more of a psychological thriller, I suppose, but a slower psychological thriller, then I would check out Hold Your Breath. Other than that, I would say if you're interested in sort of the backdrop of the 1930s like Dust Bowl era and you're looking for a movie to watch around that, I do think it does an exceptional job of showcasing what that was like. But that's really all it's got going for it at the end of the day. So those are my thoughts on Hold Your Breath. I would love to know what you guys thought of this one if you have seen it. Subscribe to join the Movie Nerd family, and I hope to see you in the next episode.